Welcome to another episode of Be Love TV. I'm so excited that another week you've allowed me to come into your homes, come into your living room, come into your lives and share with you some deep truths, some energizing facts, and just a great experience. I know that by now you know that Be Love is not just about being love and showing love, but it's about embodying love and unleashing life. And I'm grateful today to have a fantastic, peerless conversation partner who is going to share with us some significant insight into what's going on in this particular moment in American history, which is so much like so many other moments in American history that we have not just experienced, but we have endured and survived. I'm grateful today to have my brother Cassius Rudolph, the pastor of the Saints Memorial Community Church here in New Jersey, but also the former national field director for Rainbow Push Coalition, where he was there helping the Reverend Dr. Jesse Jackson make this nation be what it says it is on paper. But Cassius, what's up, man?
My brother, man, I definitely thank you for including this humble servant, man. Definitely appreciate you, man, and all the work that you're doing for our people. It's just good to be here, man. How's everything?
Man, I'm a black man in America trying not to get killed and blamed for my
Aren't we both?
Right, man.
We both.
Listen, every guest that comes on Be Love, the first question I ask them is, what makes you come alive?
What makes me come alive? Well, listen, the first thing that comes to my mind is definitely that of the great preacher and scholar, that of Howard Thurman.
Sure.
Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive and go do that, because the world needs people that come alive. And for me, man, it's serving people, serving others, service to others, man, loving my family. I love music. And so through music, I think that's definitely something transformative, and ministry, serving God's people in this present age. And that means more than just preaching in the pulpit. That means being out in the streets and doing the real work. Just like Dr. West said, you can't lead the people if you don't love the people. You can't save them if you don't serve them. And so I serve a community church, and ever since I've been there, I've been barking to them. We have to be the community, and that means getting out of our pews and going out into the community. So to me, that makes me come alive.
Man, no, man, that's real. Man, before we get into the meat of why we're here, I gotta ask, bro, what's the most ridiculous thing you've done in quarantine so far?
Man, so I think about that question. There's a lot of stuff come up in my head, but to me, I think protesting in the midst of a pandemic. I mean, this is crazy, man. So I've been at a few protests across the country, man. I've been back in the city, back in Harlem, down in Philadelphia, and marching with protesters, clergy, pastors, and community leaders. And so, in my head, it's like we're fighting these multiple pandemics, and it's like, okay, well, am I going to stay inside because they say social distancing and stay-at-home orders and things like that? Or am I going to really go out here and just risk my life because I'm already at risk anyway, living black? And so I think, to me, that can be categorized as the most ridiculous thing I think that I've done so far.
So I mean, using, and we can center your experiences. Why do you think so many of us are braving the COVID-19 virus in an attempt to fight the pandemic of police brutality and white supremacy?
Man, the main thing that comes to mind is this: we're tired. We are tired, and that leads right into the reaction of the killing of George Floyd. We are tired. We already know that it's a burden being black. I think about the rage that James Baldwin talks about, and so we're like, you know what? Let's risk it all. I mean, here we go again. We can't believe that another brother, another sister have been shot and killed at the hands of police, at the hands of state-sanctioned violence. And here we go. We see that a lot of people of color, mainly black folks, are dying high rates of COVID-19, and then you have this thing of racism and police brutality still killing us. Folks are like, okay, well, we have to do something about it. So let's put our feet to the pavement.
There is something unique about this moment because because of the public health crisis, and we know that gun violence is a public health crisis, particularly as it relates to these white mass shooters. And it's interesting that we never racialize that public health crisis, but that too is a public health crisis, and it is generally perpetuated by young white men. But there's something about the COVID-19 crisis, right, that has disproportionately impacted Black and brown communities, primarily because of the pre-existing conditions that existed in our economy, right? The pre-existing condition of poverty has led to the pre-existing conditions in our physical bodies that make us susceptible to COVID-19. But this idea that both of these pandemics, the pandemic of state-sanctioned violence and the pandemic of COVID-19, both impact Black bodies. And I'm wondering, is it something about the compounding nature of this moment that has really caused alarm bells to go off, particularly in white folks' minds?
Well, yeah, I totally agree. So when you're talking about these multiple pandemics and how it faced non-white communities, it's just like an eruption that's been waiting to happen. So to be honest, when you think about it, I'm still trying my best to work through all of this. I mean, especially being a pastor and being someone on the front lines that's protesting and getting out and trying to stand on behalf of all people, especially all Black folks. It's hard to work through that. But I will say this, these multiple pandemics is something we've been experiencing long before a COVID-19 come on the scene. I mean, white folks seem to be confused and don't understand that. They just think, oh, this is something that they've been always doing. Let's have a kumbaya moment. Let's sit at the table and see what we can. It's a part of violence and hatred that we can no longer be silent of. And a way to respond to all of this is to build this legacy, I think, of love, and what you talk about, and which we know, and this legacy of love and resistance. And this is a part of that.
I'm interested. So, George Floyd's murder, to see, I mean, unfortunately, his life became the tragic poem of America, of the suffocating impact of white supremacy that has led to the slow death of Black lives for over 400 years. But I'm interested how in these conversations, we talk about Rodney Bryant, who recently was murdered, and fortunately the assailants against his life have, at least one of those officers has gotten some federal charges thrown his way, some serious charges thrown his way that could render his life victim to the death penalty, which I do not agree with in any instance. And we talk about even now in our state, we're talking more about Maurice Gordon, who may or may not have had some mental health concerns, right? So I'm thinking about the compounding nature of of the injustices that intersect with Blackness, like mental health with Maurice Gordon, gender with Breonna Taylor, a Black woman who's murdered in her own home because of the legality of no-knock warrants. And Rodney Bryant, who's a formerly incarcerated brother, out on release because of the COVID-19. So the reality that people who are formerly incarcerated are always locked in this system of police surveillance and police domination. But there's also somebody like Tony McDade, who is a trans brother killed in Florida, but we don't hear outcries about Tony McDade, who's trans. As a pastor, as a person of faith, how do you assess our lack of outrage for our trans brothers and sisters, and even our Black sisters who are being killed? Where's the imbalance in the public outrage? Because it's not because it's not because America loves black men. That's not. America doesn't have a love for Black men. We know that. But why is it that the narrative around Black men murdered by police does not rise to the level of Black women or Black trans folk?
I think because the microscope is always focused on men. But that comes from a system of always lifting up men instead of women. And for example, I come from an old school background, old school Baptist church, pastor, old school from the South, and you know this, growing up in this Black Baptist church, there was certain no's and don'ts and certain things we wouldn't talk about, especially when you talk about women in leadership and accepting our queer people like they are, just as God created them. And so we see this even today, how we have Black trans folk dying and getting killed, and you have the faith community not speaking up, some, won't say all, and the majority of Black folks not really saying anything. But until all Black lives matter, we can't move to another stage, man. So we still got a lot of work to do, bro. Got a lot of work to do. And it's going to take those like yourself and those like our freedom fighters to really sit down with pastors, preachers, and folks alike to let them know that this is a subject for us as well.
Now that's important. That's important because the onus is really on us. Those of us who have institutional power in churches, and those of us who benefit from middle class privilege and male privilege, on top of, alongside our the Black demerits in this society rooted in anti-Blackness. It's really up to us, those of us who have privilege, to leverage that privilege to really create new safety nets and new levels of social security for those who have been marginalized.
I totally agree. It is going to definitely take us because, far too long, persons of privilege or some sense of privilege is silent to the issues that really matter. And when we talk about this all the time, it's just not, white folks that we have to get in order and get in line, but some of our own people we have to get in order and get in line because, how do you think you got to where you are?
Yeah.
And so it's going to be incumbent upon us to make sure that we push them to the next level.
Nah, that's real. Yeah. You spoke about white people, and whiteness has come up. And you can't talk about race without talking about whiteness and white supremacy, which has been the fallacy in racial conversations for so long, is that we've made race about Black and brown and not about whiteness, right? What do we need white people to do in this moment? What it is white people's job to end racism.
Yes.
What do we need to do, bro?
So when I think about that, it's just a whole big discussion that needs to be had. And so when we think about white folks, and especially white Christians, they are at the root of this problem. And so when I think about white people and white Christians, and we can, I guess, lump them together, the first thing they need to do is be accountable to themselves. They need to be accountable to themselves. They need to know, number one, that they are sinners. And not just the sinners that we talk about in the church house, that you are a sinner. And what I mean by this, I was reading this article in the New York Times probably a few days ago, and it was entitled "An Open Letter to My Fellow White Christians." And it says this, and I quote, "Since long before it was a country, our country has been in flames. When we arrived on a big ship and decimated this land and their original peoples with our viruses and our guns." This is a white woman talking to white Christians. She said this: "We set this place up in flames. When we use our Christian faith as justification for killing both the heretic and heathen, we founded this country in flames. And every month, every week, every day for the last 400 years, we have been setting new flames and new fires. White Christians who come and who came before us captured human beings, beat them, raped them, stole their babies from them, and stole everything about their heritage that they ever knew. And our pastors don't teach that anymore, but we are still setting fires. And this was from a white contributor to the New York Times. So my thing is they got to be accountable for themselves. Yeah. Secondly, they got to repent. Turn away from the oppressive practices and white privilege. And third, they got
to divest from white privilege.
Yes, and they're so used to it, they can't understand it. And then third, they got to invest to everything black.
Yeah.
Black institutions, school, churches, the whole 9 yards.
Man, I love it. James Perkinson, and I'm gonna pick this up when I keep doing my writing. James Perkinson, in his book Outing White Theology, Outing White Supremacy, that he says, in a sense, that white people must empty themselves of their whiteness, right? Because and you got to be clear about this, there's a difference between white skin and whiteness, right? So when we're talking about whiteness and white supremacy, we're not talking about ancestry, we're not talking about skin color, we're talking about a logic, we're talking about a logic, a philosophical underpinning, something that Foucault says works beneath the consciousness, right? Your professor Cornel West talks about how racism is subjectless, like it works beneath the consciousness of all of us. And we have to get to the point where white people, black people, brown people experience a white kenosis.
Exactly.
We have to, that idea and that word kenosis that we find, and he thought it's not robbery to be,
yes, sir.
He emptied himself, right? That's what we need. We need white people, particularly white men, to experience a white kenosis, to empty themselves, divest of white privilege, white power, white supremacy on a daily basis. Because one of the problems that is that there are too many white people out here who think they graduated out of racism.
Exactly. Because you know why? Because they have a few black friends. They let them come to the table. Or they text them in moments where it's hard for you, but what can I do? What words can I? I'm like, I had somebody reach out to me some time ago, and I'm like, are you serious? And so they have to empty themselves. It's like starting all over again. I was talking about this earlier today in an interview, and because yesterday, it's been 54 years since the Black Power statement came out by Stokely in Mississippi. And one thing that Stokely said was this: in order for America to really live on a basic principle of human relationships and to build a new society, racism must die. And that goes along just with white supremacy. And I said this: I said, America as we know it is on life support.
Yeah.
White supremacy is running out. The rest of America's body has cried out so long, I can't breathe, to the point that she must die a death so that a new America can live again and life be offered to everybody. To all people. This got to happen. Death comes before resurrection dies.
You are saying we are dying of whiteness.
Yes.
The problem is statistically, we think that statistically we've been convinced that blackness and poverty are death sentences. But the reality is whiteness is a death sentence.
Yeah. So when you say whiteness, we're dying of whiteness and whiteness is a death sentence, you can see that they are starting to realize that.
Yeah, this is it. Because we don't think about how white privilege corrodes the very soul.
Yeah, it does.
Nah, this is good. This is good, man. Listen, we got to wrap this thing up. We can go on and on.
It really does that.
What is a legislative strategy out of this moment?
One thing I'll say, And it's cool to say, I really don't know when we talk about legislation, because there's many avenues that you can face. Sure. But when I think about a strategy that can really get us beyond this era of police violence, I think about one strategy, and that's abolition.
Abolition.
In order to eradicate police violence, one must eradicate whiteness and white supremacy all the way.
We have to function. We need more clergy and more people in the pew who are operating from an abolitionist ethic, right? That when do we get to the point? Because let's not forget this. Let's not forget this, because you brought this up earlier about the history of white Christianity and the perpetual onslaught of Black life, right? Let's not forget, and I get this from Michael Emerson and Christian Smith in their book Divided by Faith, is that they really talk about how poor white Christians who want to be slave masters but are too poor to be slave masters become police officers during the chattel period, during the chattel era, because them being able to patrol slaves is the only way they could be white.
The only way. And now you see that now. You still see that. It's true today. It is true today. So I'm telling you, man.
Isn't it crazy that the only way to be Black, the only way to be white during slavery, the only way to really be white during slavery was to be anti-Black.
Exactly.
And white Christians did that, Doc. White Christians did that.
Exactly. So, Doc, we got to have that strategy, and it has to eradicate that, man. And so, in other words, I think one thing that we need as a strategy too is this multidisciplinary collaboration. I think doctors, lawyers, teachers, preachers, artists, we need everyone to be working together. But that I agree with you, man. They want it to be so white that they'll do anything to be against Black folk. And so we got some work to do.
We got some work to do. Thank you, bro, for joining us. Before we go, I want to just throw my 6 things out there that I want us to work on if we are going to move toward the abolition of police brutality. One is there has to be mandatory appointments of special prosecutors to conduct grand jury hearings in every case of police activity that ends in fatalities. We need the institution of quarterly anti-racism training and the development of techniques for de-escalating. Now that's reform. That's not quite abolition. I'm honest about that. Third, we need the implementation of police community residency requirements. You can't police in neighborhoods you don't live in.
Exactly. And that's exactly what we need.
We have to defund the militarization of police and defund asset forfeiture programs that allow these local police departments to get rich by over-policing. And lastly, we need, well, not just lastly, we also need a national registry mandating state and local law enforcement to report all police conduct, not just.
And we see that in some states. Some states, I think New York and California.
Right, we're seeing it growing right now. We don't just want to know when they beat somebody Black. We want to know when they treated their coworkers the wrong way. We want to know when we want to know every infraction that's been put up against them, and it needs to be nationally accessible. Because if I'm driving through Louisiana,
I need to know
the cops who are at work in Louisiana on slave patrol. That's what I want to know.
Well, we saw that. We see that right in New Jersey. I was looking earlier about an officer who pepper sprayed and harassed some young Black kids in Jersey, and the guy had just been through 9 other police departments and been placed there. So we definitely need that national registry for that.
And you know what we need, man? Because Brother George Floyd died because blackness and poverty were death sentences for him. He tried to pass a counterfeit 20. But you know what? If he had something, and if we had something in this country like a guaranteed jobs bill, or if we had something like a guaranteed basic income, he wouldn't have to get counterfeit $20 to buy something that he thinks he needs. So we need to build an economic floor that is sturdy for everybody in this country, man.
You need to make sure you print that up, write that up for us, and we need to send it across the country, because this is something that needs to happen, and it needs to happen in this moment.
Hopefully it'll go to the Christian Recorder real soon. And
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I know you love the too. Man, thank you, Pastor Rudolph, for joining us today. Listen, Be Love Nation, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. I hope that you were able to take something away that will allow you to be impacting and be powerful in this particular moment. This moment is calling for all of us to stand up. There's no time for sideline engagement. We have to be projectile hope. We have to throw ourselves into the fight. And guess what? When you throw yourself into the fight, you're not just showing love, you're not just having love, but that's when you are able to be loved. Follow us, subscribe to this YouTube channel. Meet me back here next week as we talk some more about where we are as a nation and what we need to do to not just survive, but thrive in this particular moment. And until I see you again, peace.